These are people who work hard but no longer have a voice. I am your voice.
Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new live stream. Make sure you guys hit that like button. Let's get to 100 likes, and we just hit 100 likes. Make sure you guys like the stream, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell if you are already subscribed so you don't miss another video or stream. We're having people pour in right now as we speak, and we're 79 days away from Election Day, and we have a lot to talk about. We're going to get to some data. We're going to get to some polling. We're going to get to some news about the DNC already in chaos. You have people taking away the microphone from within the building. They're getting escorted out. You have all these people lining the streets as we speak in Chicago talking about Killer Kamala. That's the nickname that they've given to her. It was Genocide Joe. I guess now it's Killer Kamala. They're kind of falling off a little bit with the nickname game, but they are there for Gaza, and they are not exactly happy about what's going on with Kamala Harris. Many people thought this would calm some of their fears, and it might to an extent, but it kind of just goes to show that in the eyes of a lot of people, Kamala Harris is just the continuation of the failed policies of the Biden administration, except she wants to weaken it even further. She's proposing policies that are batshit insane regarding the economy. She's done it in 2019 when she had to come up with policies, and then she pretended when she kind of got slotted in this time around to the nomination, she never really supported those policies. But the policies that she's proposing are either A, Donald Trump's policies, and it means nothing because it runs contrary to her record as vice president, or B, these are policies like price controls, price and wage controls. It's been a recurring theme of every single communist country. It leads to shortages. It leads to breadlines. Even when we've tried it here with Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon tried it. Didn't exactly work out too well. So she has no policies that work. She wants to build a bunch of houses for people, and she wants to give people a bunch of money that will just drive up the housing market prices for everybody. So a lot of her policies are sound good, doesn't work type of stuff, and we'll see how it exactly ends up shaking out. But even the people in the center, some people in the media, they started to turn on her, and you look at her betting odds, she kind of dipped significantly. She's now in a dead heat tie with Donald Trump now in the betting odds. He's back to a tie, even though some of the polling released today, it's a little iffy for Donald Trump, but you look into the polls, you look at where the polls were 4 years ago, the same exact polls would show that he's in a much, much better position overall. And keep in mind, this is already her convention bump. She's already riding it. You know, it's just a question, is she going to really extend it? Is she going to expand upon it? This convention's a clown show already. You have all these protesters. You have a bunch of C-list celebrities. They're going to have, a different one each night emceeing it. They are going to probably have a lot of these like weak, fake, I'm a Republican, but I'm voting for Kamala Harris type of people, which is just basically saying I have terminally ill TDS and I cannot be contained. I have to vote for Kamala Harris, somebody who, opposes every single thing that these so-called I'm a Reaganite type of people stood for. You think Reagan would support price and wage controls, rent controls? You think Reagan would support giving or building all these free government housing on taxpayer? Of course not. That's not the point. These people are a very small minority of the public. They amplify them. They give them a voice to sway public opinion. Is it exactly going to make the difference? Is it exactly going to matter at the end of the day? I feel like a lot of people are kind of numb to a lot of the propaganda. 32% of Americans say they have any trust in the mainstream media. That is the lowest level ever. It's 1% lower than 2016. And that kind of showcases that a lot of the media push for Kamala, it's not going to have the same effect that it did for somebody like Joe Biden ahead of the 2020 election. It's just not. It's not. They're trying to energize their voter base, and they are. We polled. We're in the field. We were in the field today polling. We got the poll done so quickly, you wouldn't believe it, partially because Democrats, they just really want to be polled right now. We polled nationally, and our sample was ridiculous. The first poll, the first half of it we got a D plus 16 sample. D plus 16. That's what we got. We didn't try to get that. You know, you try to eventually weigh it down, but if you get a D plus 16 sample, it's hard to do. The black share of our sample was 25%. The first go around, the second go around, it was 21%. That is unheard of. You'll never get that. Obama being on the top of the ticket in 2008, you saw 13% of the electorate, and Kamala Harris is not going to generate that level of enthusiasm among black voters. It's just not happening. You know, maybe you get 13% of the electorate this cycle ends up being black. That's fine. But you look at the rate of the responses is insane. Millennials and women. That's another thing. Women and millennial women between the ages of 25 and 34, that was like a good third of the sample. In fact, only 30% of our sample voted for Donald Trump in 2020. 40% of the sample voted for Biden, and the rest didn't vote before. A lot of those people may probably not even vote. If that's the case, they never voted before. And those people were not exactly breaking a ridiculous amount for Kamala Harris either. For the record, we've seen polls time and time again, that lower propensity voter, they tend to be gravitating towards Donald Trump this cycle, which is definitely huge for him if they show up to the polls and he's able to get them. And I think a lot of them will in some places. We're chasing ballots like none other. The ground game is becoming more and more robust. It's very, very grassroots, but it is working. You got different pieces, different moving pieces in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, just across the country. And Democrats, they're stopping to register voters as frequently because where are the voter registration drives? You know, it's August. It's about to be September. It was just promoted by the media endlessly, but they're not doing it now. Why? Because they know that the lower propensity voters, they're not going to be backing Kamala Harris by, ridiculous margins the way they were backing Joe Biden, and they're afraid that it's going to end up backfiring on them, and them promoting that is going to help Donald Trump. Think about it. Democracy is coming back to bite them in the rear end, and they won't even touch base on that anymore. They're not touching base on democracy. They're not touching base on 1/6 because they lost the argument for both with July 13th. They don't want people to bring that up even in, retaliation to that because they don't want people to remember Donald Trump's strength and his shining moment on that day in Butler, Pennsylvania. And on top of it, they don't want people to really remember the fact that they don't care about democracy because they don't. It was always a ploy. You look at Kamala Harris. She didn't get a single vote either primary cycle, but now she's been anointed, she's been handed the nomination. That's a little bit of a problem for them to be running on that whole democracy argument and win on that argument if their entire campaign is running fully contrary to that fact. Everybody wanted Biden, but Biden wasn't doing too well with those independent voters. He wasn't energizing enough people, so they had to sub him out at the last minute for somebody with zero experience in a primary. And a lot of the ideas that Kamala Harris believes in, and she's slowly starting to implode because she's talking about them a little bit, that would come out in a primary. But there's no primary, so she's going directly to the general. But even then, she's making mistakes. She's making these gaffes, these missteps, and it's not exactly working out too good. So while I do believe that there's no shot they're going to replace her, the polls have tightened. They've bought in enough. It was even questionable for a while if they were even going to replace Joe Biden. It just got too bad for them to the point where they ended up, being forced to replace him because they didn't think he could win. Well, Kamala Harris already, she's not exactly doing too well for her honeymoon period. In your honeymoon period, you're only winning the popular vote by 1.4%. You're not doing so well, especially given, on this day in history, Hillary was up by 4 points over that, and Joe Biden was up by 6 points over that. And you want to go to the battleground states? We'll look at Arizona. Can't win in Arizona. You're losing in Nevada. Wisconsin, which Biden led by 7, Hillary led by 9 at this point. You're only up by 1. And if you're only up by 1 in Wisconsin and you're a Democrat, you're going to lose. End of discussion. There's no path forward given the recent awful polling there, especially against Donald Trump. But you look at Michigan. Michigan is, it's still close. It's a 2-point race. That's the state Harris is pulling ahead a little bit more in. But you look at Pennsylvania. Trump has a lead in Pennsylvania. Trump has a lead in North Carolina. Donald Trump has a lead in Georgia. So whichever way you want to look at it, Donald Trump is that favorite to win all of these states, even with the current response bias in polling. You're seeing it unfold. Donald Trump is in a very, very, very strong position, and there's nothing they can do about it. And like I said, there's not a lot of people that have really changed their minds about this race. Harris has an advantage because she's getting more voters to, come on board. But even when they poll enthusiasm, Democrat enthusiasm goes up in the polls. But when they poll, are you, likely to vote? Because an enthusiastic vote is the same as an unenthusiastic vote. Donald Trump was decimating Biden in the enthusiasm gap back in 2020. He was doing it again now. Democrats have closed it, even though, a month from now that gap may open again. But you look at the question of how likely are you to vote? Very likely to vote on the Democrat side is not exactly a ridiculously amount changed. But you talk about response bias, and people are still doubting the existence of it. And it will exist more in some polls than others. But the New York Times conducted several polls, and we kind of have even more proof. And for some reason, 538 will give them an A+ rating, despite the fact that they were awful in 2020, despite the fact that they have been awful on many occasions. They still get an A+ rating, but certain pollsters that may have had a bad 2022, they give them a D. For example, like Trafalgar, who has nailed the Rust Belt time and time again, 2016, 2018, 2020. Now they apparently get, a D grade for one reason or another, despite the fact that this far out in August, their polls were relatively accurate. In the midterms, they actually underestimated Republicans in some places in 2022 from, in August. As we got closer to the election, they changed a little bit, and they get a bad grade. But New York Times, no, they're perfect. They get an A+ rating for some reason. ABC, Washington Post, Biden plus 17 in Wisconsin. Oh, we'll give them an A+ rating. The ratings are garbage. Everybody knows the ratings are garbage. But when you look into some of these polls, something is kind of out of whack here. And you could. Okay, something went wrong with the microphone there, but we should be back. I think we're back. I could be wrong, but something went wrong with the microphone. Should be good. I don't know how long it was off for, but I think for probably about 5 seconds. But we're back. Okay, so as I was saying, something's off about this when you look at that dot map. Now, Georgia is believable. For the most part, it looks relatively uniform. Obviously, the northern Atlanta area you have more Republican exurbs up there. Republicans net a lot of votes from northern rural Georgia. Southern rural Georgia, there's not as many people. The Savannah, Augusta areas are more, split evenly. That's fair. Nothing's really out of whack there. I do think that Trump up 4 in Georgia. I even think that's an overestimation for the record. But then you look at North Carolina. And North Carolina, there's a lot of exurbs that are around Charlotte that are very deep red. And there's plenty of densely populated areas that you would see as like rural on this map. And they're just not being filled in. And a lot of the areas that are filled in blue. And for some reason, Trump is down 2 in North Carolina, but he's up 4 in Georgia. So one of these states was polled correctly. The other state was polled very poorly because, I respect the transparency of the dot maps, but we saw this back in 2016 in the same polls from the New York Times, and they were awful polls, and they were really inaccurate across the Rust Belt states. And you'd look at this like they'd have the WOW counties going blue. They'd have, Milwaukee 50-50 and much of the Driftless area going blue. And the poll would be Biden plus 10 in Wisconsin or some ridiculous nonsense like that. It would not add up whatsoever if you translated it to a county map. But you look at North Carolina, one of these states looks more like you would expect than the other state. I'm not saying Georgia, Trump's going to win it by 4. I'm not saying that he's even going to win it he might even win it by like 1. But the map looks roughly what you would expect. North Carolina, Kamala Harris is really going to struggle in the state of North Carolina in terms of her ability to win it. It's an already very polarized state. Democrats are not doing too well with party registration data. Ever since Harris has entered the race, they've actually lost 5,000 votes to the Republicans on net. And I know that's not quite everything, because you do have ancestral Democrats that are leaving, joining the Republican Party still. you name it. But they're not exactly, there's not really a lot of evidence that you'd see a massive rebound in North Carolina, but in Georgia you would bleed support, especially given how bad early polls have been cycle after cycle in the state of North Carolina. Democrats usually lead at this point, and they're not even leading now, despite this honeymoon period, this honeymoon bump. They're not even leading now. But I wanted to look into the poll a little bit further, and they polled Vance's favorables, and they polled Tim Walz's favorables. Now, keep this in mind. I do believe that nationally Vance is in the negatives. I want to have that disclaimer. I don't believe it's that definitive. He's not ridiculously in the negatives. He's got like an approval rating in the mid-30s. He's got a disapproval rating in the mid-40s. He's not like a drag on the ticket. You have a lot of Democrats that have formed an opinion about him. Republicans are less likely to form an opinion about him. That's why he's in the negative. So when I see the poll out of Georgia, where he's at 35% favorable, 46% unfavorable, Trump leads the poll in Georgia, by the way, it makes sense. Tim Walz, a lot of polls have him in the favorables, but his favorables are just as low as Vance. Less people know him, so they're less likely to have an unfavorable opinion. So the Georgia numbers favorable-wise in Georgia for Vance and Walz are relatively reasonable. I don't think the split's going to be that big at the end of the day. In terms of Nevada, kind of a similar thing here. It's somewhat viable. But then you get to North Carolina, and there's no way Walz is up by 14 in North Carolina. And why do more people know who Walz is in North Carolina than Georgia? Partially because Democrats tend to know who he is more so than not, and there's more liberal independents that are oversampled. And then you get to Arizona, where Harris is at 50% in the poll, and she leads by 5, and it's ridiculous. And this the numbers were actually wrong here out of Arizona, because Vance is underwater by 32 points in Arizona. That's not true. There's no way. Maybe he's underwater by 10, but he's not underwater by 32 points in Arizona. I don't think 60% of people do, and this is among independents, do 60% of independents even know who J.D. Vance really is? Have they formed an opinion on him? Because Tim Walz is barely above that in some of these other polls. Obviously, I think that over 60% of independents have formed an opinion, but the opinion is not minus 32 in Arizona. That is a liberal, independent oversample. Same thing goes for North Carolina to a lesser extent. So you see, even within the poll, more evidence that would support a response bias, because if Vance is really minus 32 in Arizona, he's definitely in Nevada, going to be similarly unfavorable. But he's not. And why is Walz just the most popular man? He's the man of the year in Arizona. He's up 25, but it's like a 60-point net favorable shift among independents in Arizona. Zero chance in hell those numbers are accurate. The Georgia ones, the Nevada ones, those are more buyable to an extent, even if I don't even know how much I buy them in Nevada in terms of the Walz net favorables. But when you look at North Carolina, when you look at Arizona, you can tell something is wrong here in terms of the sample. And the map, it checks out when you look at it on the map. You see a lot of these polls that are coming out. Even then, they're not even bad polls for Trump historically out of these states, but the polls are just oversaturated with response bias to the point where it's just unreal. And pollsters are going to struggle when they have to sort through this. Yes, pollsters wait. We're waiting. The poll that we've conducted. By the way, if you guys want to support the polling fund, you guys want to donate directly to the GoFundMe, it's the first link in the description. For the record, it's the first link in the description. You guys can click on that. We've raised over $5,300 in the first, couple days that the GoFundMe has been there. We're teaming up with On Point, SoCal Research, several other, quality data analysts whose names don't quite get recognized. But there's a lot of people working on this project to actually get a national poll done. The sample that we've done, I don't know what it's going to end up being. It's definitely close nationally, closer than the previous poll. I don't know what the raw number is. It definitely could be calculated very shortly here. It could be calculated. Probably we'll get it out by tomorrow. But you look at this, the sample size and some of these things, and I don't know if I really would be able to share some of the raw data, but we will break it down possibly in a video tomorrow or a video this week. But when we're calculating the raw data, the sample that we're getting is just ridiculous. It's very difficult to weigh, very few of certain demographics that are key and moving right. We weren't really able to, get enough of them, partially because the sample was just so oversaturated by liberal millennial women and black women mainly. And by the way, in terms of the black voters, they were oversampled, but Trump somehow is making gains with that demographic too, even though it was oversampled. So, even then it's really, really tough. But that's kind of why Kamala Harris is pulling ahead in a lot of these polls, because it's so hard to weigh down. You even see it in terms of these never Trump Republicans, identify as Republican, they seep through the sample. You have liberal independents, true independents that are more liberal than not that are seeping through the sample. And that kind of explains why the polls, to an extent, have been moving left. I'm not saying that's the only reason, because I believe the race is closer, at least for now. It doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. Trump could pull ahead again. But this notion that, Kamala Harris is really gaining on Trump, and in some of these polls she's gained, she's up by 4 points, and ABC, they've teamed up with Ipsos, which is just an awful online panel. They've been awful this entire cycle. They've been outliers. I mean, you look at them, Emerson, they're switching up their methodology. Their latest poll veered off to the left a little bit. Pollsters just don't understand how to handle what's going on. They don't understand how to navigate this climate shift. And you're seeing stuff like this, results like this with the Charlotte metro area, overwhelmingly Democrat in terms of the responses. That is not exactly representative of the Charlotte metro. You include all those counties, the collar counties around Charlotte and Charlotte. They did actually vote for Donald Trump in 2020. You're not going to see that much of a shift, and you're not going to see that few responses in the actual electorate come election day. Union County, is that Union County? Is that? You look at that on the map here. I could actually pull it up and even compare it. But there's several large counties. Union County is a very, very big county. And where are the responses? Where are the responses out of Union County? It gave Trump 61% of the vote. It's a large suburban county right next to Charlotte. It's not even on the map. There's no responses from Union County. So already you kind of see this. Yeah, there's some responses from these counties over here. Not really a lot of them, though. So already in the dot maps, which, again, they showed in the awful dot maps in 2020 were awful. When it came down to the final results, they did not match up. They were not representative. You're seeing the same exact thing play out this time around when you look at this. Very few responses, even in some of these other counties, like take Henderson, for example. There's no responses. In fact, the responses we see out of Henderson, mostly liberal for some reason. So the voters that they are reaching in these, very right-leaning places, just like we've seen time and time again in Wisconsin, they're reaching the teacher, they're reaching the librarian who answers the poll. They're not reaching the average individual representative of that part of the state in the electorate time and time again. Some states, they're better at polling than others, for the record. I mean, Georgia, you look at Georgia polls have been pretty accurate, 2022, 2020, 2018, both runoffs. Georgia is like the gold standard, and they polled Georgia correctly. But then you look at North Carolina, where polls, especially early polls, tend to underestimate Republicans. It's a mess. It's a big mess, but already Trump still, despite having two awful polls in the mix from pollsters that do drop a lot of polls, he's still up 1.2 in the state of North Carolina. And I think that he's going to arguably improve even more, but it just depends on turnout. That's what people don't understand. There's a lot of people in the country that love Trump. There's a lot of people in the country that don't like Trump. You just got to make sure that in these swing states, the number of people who like Trump, which is roughly around 50%, already out of the gate in North Carolina, you just got to make sure that their numbers are going to get up, because you haven't seen a lot of people move under this administration. And the people you have seen move largely moved out of New York and to Florida. That's pretty much it. The New York City area, New York, New Jersey, they moved to Florida. They're making Florida redder, but the average migration patterns in and out of states. Georgia was growing like crazy the last 4 years of the Trump administration. It stopped growing. North Carolina to a certain extent. Virginia definitely. We're about to see what's going to happen this fall in a lot of those states. But I'm confident. I've spent a lot of time this week looking at data, looking at trends, looking at shifts, looking at Trump's favorable numbers, and just, trying to extrapolate them election after election. I spent a lot of time looking at this stuff. And the more I looked at it, the more confident that I became that Donald Trump's going to go out there this November and he's going to win. It just depends on turnout. It depends on the ground game, which already you see a lot of people doing a lot of things. There's all these new initiatives. You have Pennsylvania, you have PA Chase, you have Early Vote Action, you have the Turning Point app that people can download and get to work on phone banking and stuff like that. You could download the TP Action app for that as well. There's so many things that people can do, and people understand it because this is just the last chance to save our country. We're finally doing something. We're trying to get people out. We're mobilizing them. What are the Democrats exactly spending their money on right now anyways? I mean, they have an operation. It's true. But in some places like Georgia, it's weakened. The Abrams apparatus that they built up in 2020, it's already weakened. So again, there's a lot to be, not to be complacent about, but there's a lot to be hopeful for. It's not exactly like it's a done deal. It's not like things can't go south. It's not like things can't get better, though, because they can. But people just need to get out and vote. That's all they really need to do. And then this election is going to be won. That's kind of the takeaway. So Democrats are having their convention. It's already in chaos. They've got a bunch of crazy things going on. They have a vasectomy doctor on site to give vasectomies. They have an abortion doctor on site to give abortions. This is real stuff. This is not made up stuff. They're actually having a lot of these crazy people that they're trying to attract, and then even then they're not crazy enough for other crazy people who are protesting, threatening police officers outside the DNC, trying to get into the building. It's a mess. I'm not saying it's going to become 1968, the sequel, although there are a lot of similarities to 1968 as an election, mainly because of the fact that you have somebody who is seen as the president, who is going to be running against somebody who kind of was, defeated in a questionable election before and then came back, even though Nixon was never president, and became the nominee, ran a campaign, talking about de-escalating stuff and law and order and all that stuff. And then he became the president against somebody who was largely a replacement candidate in Humphrey, the VP at the time, to Johnson. That's who essentially just assumed the position. So already you see a lot of similarities to a certain extent. And I think that Donald Trump, he's just got to go out there. He got to win. And we got a month before early voting starts in North Carolina. We have a few weeks until the ABC debate. Harris does not look like she'll be showing up at the Fox debate. I really would encourage Trump to show up with an empty microphone on the other side, an empty podium, and he could debate the empty podium. He's doing debate prep with Tulsi Gabbard, it's been reported, and that's definitely something because it shows that he's not only taking the debate seriously, but he's teaming up with the number one enemy at one point of Kamala Harris. She got utterly decimated by Tulsi Gabbard. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out down the stretch as well. So a lot's going on, and we're going to be discussing quite a bit, but we have to get to the super chats, and we'll get to them. We already have quite a few already, and when they pop up, we're going to get going on that. But if you guys have any more, send them in. If you guys want to donate to the polling fund, we've raised over $5,000 in a few days. The link for that is in the description down below. Also, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Let's get to 195K if possible. I'll be live streaming after the DNC. Maybe not tomorrow. Definitely on Tuesday we will be. There's some primaries going on Tuesday. We'll be live Thursday after Kamala Harris's speech. Wednesday, it's a little bit iffy, but we will be going live at least 2 days after the DNC. If something crazy happens tomorrow or it's very notable, we might go live. I'm not going to necessarily promise you guys that I will, because don't hold me to it. I might not. So apparently the super chats are not popping up. So I would have to... Here, we can get them. We'll get them here. Okay. Johnny Hart... Okay, they just popped up. Johnny Hart Dog for 10 says, what do you think of Trump enlisting Tulsi to help with the debate against Kamala and Trump firing some of his campaign staff? Makes me wonder how inflated her surge is. That said, I'm really glad she's doing that, firing and changing some of the staff. I'm not sure how accurate the rumors about Gabbard are. Also for 20, on a completely different note, despite what some ultra-right-wingers say, not all foreign aid's bad. Part of America First means supporting allies, Israel financially within reason, staunch ally of democracy, Middle East, sending money, etc., but within reason. So in terms of what I think about Trump enlisting Tulsi to help with the debate against Kamala, I think it's a smart thing to do. I think it's mainly a thing to do it just to have the headline out there. It's going to get under her skin. I think that arguably means a lot first and foremost. But, you know, I really think that she's somebody who kind of was in a really good position at the right time. She stepped in. She attacked Kamala on, you know, her record, mainly towards a liberal audience. It was not exactly like she was saying something that would be as well received among conservative voters. But she basically did call out Kamala Harris for being a total hypocrite and being somebody who just was kind of fake. And to a certain extent, she is fake. And that part of it is true. And I feel like Trump teaming up with Tulsi, maybe they'll discuss certain stuff. She's a smart person, and I'm sure he's going to be doing debate prep with multiple people, so I think it's a good thing. But in terms of her surge, I would encourage people to pretend like it's all real. In fact, I pretend like it's better than real. We don't want to pretend like the election's over. People should be taking the polls very seriously. Doesn't mean that they're going to be all right. Doesn't mean that Trump can't win, but I think people should be acting like the polls are as real, if not that they're overestimating Trump, so we get out and vote and make sure we can win. Let's see here. 84Z28 Bear says Anna Navarro equals Miss Pitt. Well, she'll be at the convention headlining one night. They have this quote-unquote Republican who never supported Trump since 2015, 2016 from CNN. They're going to have her essentially headline one of the nights. That's, again, they're really scraping up the bottom of the barrel. And they called her on the pamphlet a celebrity. She's not a celebrity. Nobody's ever heard of her in the real world except people that are just glued to their TV on CNN. Security TV says FBI raided a farm about 30 minutes from my house. Belongs to Dimitri Sims and his wife. Linked to the 2016 Trump campaign. Are they starting the Russia stuff again? Well, it's possible. Look, they're going to try to persecute their political opponents. They're doing it to Trump. They're going to do it to a lot of people who are Trump supporters. We've seen this even back in the Obama administration when he targeted the IRS, weaponized it against conservative groups, and Biden's doing it again on a much larger scale. Harris is going to do it on even a much larger scale, especially with the team of lunatics that are behind her. It's unbelievable. Royal Doyle says, I'm concerned about all the brainwashed people going to vote for Harris because of the hype. What are your thoughts? Well, I feel like a lot of them would have voted for Biden anyways. Who exactly is hyped to vote for Kamala that was not already hyped to vote for Biden? A lot of this hype is astroturfed to begin with. They're busing people to the rallies. They're having all these concerts so they can draw a ridiculous amount of people to the rallies. They're not exactly going there for Kamala Harris in most cases. They're going there for said artist, and by the time that she speaks at the end, they're halfway out the door. So you kind of see that. Let's see. Walk Talk 21 says, for all the talk today of disputed elections, I would hate to live in 1876 and be a Tilden supporter watching Hayes and his group take the election from you. Yeah, I mean, it is true. Back then, this is nothing new. People like to talk about this as something new. Do people really think that 2016 was a clean and fair? I mean, of course not. Trump was able to win despite it, but there's always been some level of shenanigans. I feel like during COVID, it was more heightened. They changed a lot of laws. They did a lot of stuff. But it's not like that our nation has been immune to this kind of stuff. They have less been immune Test Channel Wow says Trump's polling is going to plummet with independents when they put him in Rikers. No, if they put him in jail, then Trump is going to win in a landslide. This is why they're probably not even going to put him in jail. Because every single time we hear, oh, he's going to lose, he's being indicted, oh, he got convicted, he's going to lose, his numbers go up. Every single time his numbers go up. It puts the spotlight back on him. It makes him a martyr. Every single time his numbers go up. Polls show that jail time for Trump is extraordinarily unpopular, especially among independent voters. If they actually put him in jail or even to give him a delayed sentence to jail, it's going to give him a ridiculous amount of money. He's going to get $500 million probably in a week. And I think there's no way he's going to lose if they actually are dumb enough to put him in jail. It's not like this is an actual crime. This is not a crime to the likes of which has really been brought against anybody. The statute of limitations changes. The crime travels back in time. They spent years trying to curate this to perfection. They campaigned on getting Trump. Biden's DOJ put their number 3 in the Manhattan's district attorney's office. This is a bogus crime. If you think independents are all stupid, then Trump wouldn't get a single vote of independents to begin with. I think they're really, if they actually do that, that shows that they're really more incompetent than I thought, and or they're more desperate than I thought. That's kind of what it shows. Now, they might give him a large fine. They might give him something. He probably appeals it even if they give him a jail sentence. That doesn't even seem like he's going to be going to jail. But they've never sentenced anybody for this crime to jail like this before. But, Trump is different. But if they actually do that, oh, man, part of me says, I dare you. Part of me says, I dare him to do it. John Waffle H2P says Trump needs to do a counter rally. Well, he's doing a lot of counter rallies during the convention. They were saying Trump's not going on the campaign trail. He's in Michigan on Tuesday. He's in Pennsylvania tomorrow. He's in North Carolina on Wednesday. On Thursday, I don't know what he's doing on Thursday, but on Friday, he's going to Nevada, and then he's going to Arizona. So he's already doing multi-events a day in different swing states. He's focusing on the main 7, doing everything that he needs to do to go out there and win this election. I really think that they're really making a turnaround in a very positive direction because they needed to kind of wait a few weeks, see what exactly happened. She's only been the nominee for 4 weeks. 4 weeks ago, they replaced Biden. Now Harris is the nominee, and definitely things have taken a while to fully set in. And that's kind of what I told people, not to panic about it. And already it seems like Trump is, at least in terms of the vibes, seems like a corner was turned about a week ago anyways. So Ash K2 says LTE predicts he wins a bit less stress. Well, it is nothing to, if you're basing your stress level on what some predictor who has vastly underestimated Republicans in deep red states, by the way, every election cycle says that, this candidate's going to narrowly win the state. I would not base your predictions on something like that. I think I'd look more into the ticket splitting histories and 2016 and 2020 and realize that there's very little chance Democrats are going to win Montana or Ohio, by the way. I think it'd be very, very difficult to see Sherrod Brown winning given the average ticket splitting rate, especially with Trump on the ballot in Ohio. Sherrod Brown, John Tester, Manchin obviously retired. But those are 3 pickups right there. The question is, how much do they clear 50 by? Are they going to get to 53? Are they going to get to 54? They might stay at 52 if it's a bad night, but I can't see him getting below 52. Ted Cruz is going to be fine. Allred is like nowhere to be found here in Texas. Johnny Hartdog for 10 says people are looking forward to a Trump-Harris debate, but I'm looking forward to a Walz-Vance debate. That'll be more fun to watch. Vance was the best pick. Well, he'll be a very good debater. Whether people think he's a great pick or not, nobody can deny he's a very intelligent guy. He's a very well-spoken guy. He's coming into his own. And the fact is, Tim Walz is a slob. And you see Vance go up against Walz, it's gonna be night and day. Literally night and day. Ash K2 says PA rejects liberal Republican And MAGA fanatic, soon they'll kick Trump to the curb again. One solution, yeah, Pat Toomey would get his ass kicked in a primary. So, no, that's the thing. Mastriano didn't lose because he was MAGA. Mastriano lost because he was an abortion abolitionist in a state that is not very, pro-life in comparison to a lot of other states. And he also had no money. Mastriano did better in 2022 than Wagner did in 2018. People like to conveniently forget this for some reason. But for some reason, it had no impact on 2020 being a close race. People think Pennsylvania. Do we have to pull up the map again? Because I will pull up the map again in Pennsylvania. If you look at the state, Trump improved his vote share in nearly every county west of the eastern portion. The reason why he struggled in a lot of the northeastern portion is because Joe Biden was somebody that a lot of people were familiar with, a lot of people were comfortable with. Biden's not on the ballot anymore. If he was, he probably would have lost Pennsylvania, for the record. But now that you have Kamala Harris is not getting Biden 2020 numbers in northeastern Pennsylvania. If that happens, I'll be very surprised. But conventional wisdom would say no. Pennsylvania is going to be a state that I feel like Donald Trump is going to end up winning. Might be by even like 2 points. But we have a long way to go before Election Day. Let's see. Let's pull up the super chats again. 12 says Tim Walz drops out of the race upon hearing he has to visit the battleground states. I see what you did there. Nick Hastings says our country's in trouble. The fact that Trump Vance isn't projected to win over 400 electoral votes is sad. Should be a slam dunk victory. Well, it should be, but the country's stupid. They're filled with stupid people. You have a lot of mindless drones that hate Donald Trump because the media told them to. And by the way, any other Republican is going to get the same treatment without the benefits of Trump. Just want to throw that out there. So that's kind of the situation that we're in as it stands today. Even Biden would not have lost by a landslide. It would have been decisive, possibly, but anyone saying that Trump would win New York State, probably, not exactly. Might have been within 10, but you're not going to see Illinois fall. You're not going to see New York fall or California fall. But I agree, should be slam dunk. This is not the same country we had before. K. Ben says, I still think Trump is going to win. A lot of people are dooming. Workers want Trump to build a wall, immigration moratorium, stop crime, and no Israel. Save. Well, here's the deal about that. Trump supports a wall. Trump lowered immigration. People want Trump to have positions that Trump himself never had, at least never expressed, regarding things like Israel, and I personally support the immigration reduction. I think that legal immigration should be halted for 20, 25 years, at least on net, severely reduce it. But people are really doing revisionist history on Trump from 2016. A lot of people doing it were like 10 years old back in 2016. It's like there's no way you actually formulated an opinion other than listening to what people are certainly telling you about Donald Trump. So either way, Donald Trump is tough on crime. All he talks about is the border. All he talks about is the economy and immigration. Apparently, we're told that Trump is not going to do well with white working class voters because he's not talking to issues that matter to them. And then all he does is talk about issues that matter to them. And then people are just like claiming that that's not true. And the arguments just go around in circles, whatever, doesn't matter. Trump is fine. He doesn't need to be saved. Nick Hastings says, I guess Project 2025 doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, apparently not. Democracy does. Well, they still do the Project 2025 stuff, but the old democracy stuff, they're not doing it as much. There's really been no concrete argument. It's, Trump weird or something. It's not exactly a winning message. And honestly, I will tell people, yeah, I know they're weird. They're the real weird ones. They're actually far worse than weird. I think weird is putting it nicely. But the number one way to combat it is not to be like, well, no, they're the real weird ones. It's to just brush it off and ignore them, because that's kind of how they get under people's skin. It's like the whole you're racist thing. It's like, instead of trying to just brush it off and say, I don't care what you say. We've, 5-10 years ago, a lot of conservatives would say, well, actually, no, I'm not racist because of this. And then you're actually racist because of this. And it's like, no, just brush it off. These are the arguments of losing people. They lose. If you give their arguments merit, you're feeding into them a little bit too much. Make fun of them That's one thing, but leave it at the memes. Deblio says my stress level is way less compared to 2020 now that I don't obsess over individual polls and pointlessly argue with strangers every day on Twitter. Well, if these same people were far less doomerish in 2020 than they are now, which is like the crazy part. Maryland Degati 83 says, will Trump win if he goes? I think, honestly, I really would think that would be something that Democrats would have as like, oh, we'll win, and it would backfire on them, because it's stuff like that opens a lot of people's eyes. All these indictments made Trump stronger. All the indictments made Trump's movement stronger. American Wasp with Dieter McBusiness says, where did you go to school? Did they teach you how to read polls? Because you either don't know what you're doing. Oh, okay, this guy just wasted $5. Congratulations, buddy. Yeah, I don't know how to read polls. I've been doing it since 2015. Yeah, I have a political science degree that didn't teach me shit, for the record. It's useless. I wipe my ass with it. And then I sit here, I make 6 figures every year making fun of people like this guy on the internet who claim that they don't know how to read polls. The same losers that had Texas going blue in 2020. The same losers that had Florida going blue in 2020. The same morons that thought Iowa and Ohio would go blue in 2020. Yeah, absolutely. Give me a fucking break, man. Give me a fucking break. Stephen Knizik for 10 says, considering the Butler, Pennsylvania event happened after Biden's disastrous debate performance, should we expect another Nikki Republican to try a copycat, not blackpilling? Well, I mean, yeah, I would say that they're kind of past that point. They're kind of past the convention, so I don't think that's going to really be a factor as much. But, I mean, you got to have these safeguards. Now they have reasons to put in safeguards. I think it's less likely they're going to have them speak with, like, what, bulletproof glass. But, I mean, you never know. It could happen. I wouldn't bet money on it. I wouldn't want it to happen, but it could. It's a very slim chance it could happen. It was a slim chance it could happen to begin with. Base Cat says, you see all the pronouns listed on the Kami Kamala website registration, and these leftoids say we're weird. Also, how much does Trump win Florida by? Probably by 10. If you compare the party registration data back in 2020 to the party registration data now, Republicans have netted over 1 million voters. Now, is that always going to translate 1-to-1? Are all of those people necessarily going to vote? Not necessarily, but the early voting data is extraordinarily good, even in this primary compared to the primary in 2022. I mean, it's insane, and there's not like a lot of contested races for us. The Democrats are the ones that have the contested races and more congressional primaries, and obviously the Senate race that they have is, I believe there's primary challengers to that. I don't know. It seems like it. Let's pull this up. Florida 2022 or 2024 Senate race. Hold on. Yeah, Democrats have multiple people, and definitely Murkosal Powell is the overwhelming favorite, and technically there's some minor candidates running on the Republican side. Rick Scott's going to end up winning fairly easily. So I'm not particularly worried about that. Let's go back here. But yeah, in terms of Florida, I think Trump's going to win it by about 10 to, I could even see it being 12. If it's higher than that, like 14, 15, people on election night are going to be like, oh, we're going to win everything. And I'll have to tell people, no, you got to settle down. Florida's not representative of the nation as a whole. We've seen this movie in 2020, 2018 even, we saw the movie. 2022, we've seen the movie. 2024, it's a little different. I'm glad we have it on our side in our column, but it's not exactly going to translate 1-to-1 with the other swing states in Georgia even, let alone Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Those states that are going to really determine the outcome. Let's see. Ash K2 says, Black Pill Moment, Americans are becoming more accepting of letting children change genders. It's only a matter of time before the GOP supports it. Well, I don't think it's a majority opinion. I think it's a very unpopular position to take. But you do have this lobby that is trying to, it's an industry for them. They get a lot of people. They pressure a lot of people. They want people to buy into that notion. It's not a majority opinion. I don't think it ever will be a majority opinion. But it is sad that people that even have that position are not like going to lose the election based off of it in and of itself. But I'm not too worried about the GOP, at least verbally supporting it. But if you look behind the scenes at certain, people that they donate to in the Republican Party, that same lobby, there's a lot of people, but it's a medical thing. It really is. They make a lot of money off of this stuff, and they have a lot of politicians that they're able to get in their corner as a result. In fact, no other country in Europe, for the most part, is nearly half as radical as even these far left countries you hear about. They're nowhere near as radical on the transgender stuff as the United States. It's insane. Just like the abortion stuff. They're nowhere near. We're as radical as North Korea, China, even the countries that have it in Western Europe. It's what, 12 weeks? That's not even a winning position. Nationally, a 12-week ban probably polls at like 38% support. Think about that for a second. Not exactly even a winning issue to take. It should be. It might be one day, but that's kind of the thing. We gotta keep working at this stuff. We can't cave on everything, but we got to be smart about how we navigate it. Josh Light says, Rep, do you think maybe the push polls in North Carolina are not about North Carolina but Virginia? Are they trying to create the narrative that if Trump is struggling in North Carolina, no way he gets Virginia to get him to pull? I doubt it. I really doubt it. I mean, North Carolina and Virginia are still two different states. That's the thing. I mean, demographically speaking, they're different. They're close to each other. Just like South Carolina and Georgia are two different states. It's not exactly a one-to-one correlation. And I don't think you should focus on Virginia. I don't think he's going to win Virginia. I think it could get closer. I don't think he's going to win Virginia. I think the defortification is nice, but it wasn't like he had Virginia robbed from him in 2020 as well. The reason why he was leading so deep into the night in Virginia is because all the election day votes are the ones that get counted first from the rural areas. We saw the same thing in 2016. Trump was leading Hillary until there was like 80% in. He lost by 5. Even in 2021 when Youngkin won, I mean, there was a big red mirage. It just wasn't enough because McAuliffe ended up losing by 2 points. I don't think McAuliffe led the entire night. Think about that. Let's see. Eric from Wisconsin's American Wasp is definitely Liz Cheney's burner. I don't even know who that is. It's like, you waste money. You tell me I don't know how to do my job. I don't go to McDonald's and tell you how to do your job. And you're coming up here and you're telling me how to do my job, saying you don't know what it's like. You analyze the polls, whatever. I've been doing this for how many years have I been doing this? Even before my channel, I've been doing it. And I know that when polls in North Carolina have a weird dot map, you know damn well that the poll, something might be off about this poll, especially when Georgia has a reasonable, more plausible dot map. You don't see swings like that in presidential races. You can critique my work in 2022 all you want. I'm going to critique it with you. I'm going to tell you what I got wrong. You're probably going to tell me what I got wrong because you're stupid, because you're dumb, because you think you know more than you really do. So that's what it comes down to. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. John Campbell says, if 1-6 never happened, this election would be over. I'm in Maricopa County, home of the Rhinos, and that's the main thing holding legacy Republicans back. No, it's not. Look, I'm not saying it helps with those people, because it doesn't. Obviously, I don't think it helps with really anybody. But to say that that's what's holding them back, they weren't voting for Trump before 1-6. They would find some other excuse. These people are deranged. These Rhinos are deranged. That's the main problem I have with a lot of these people. They just will not support Trump for any circumstance because they've been brainwashed. They've been, for some reason, over the years, I don't know what happened. It can't even just be the John McCain stuff because a lot of them were against him even before the John McCain stuff. It's been going on for years and years and years with these people. And there is a segment of them in Arizona for sure. But, I mean, you look at this. We'll pull this up, actually. This is going to surprise a lot of people. But it's true. Donald Trump in Arizona, yeah, he gained in every county in 2020 from 2016. Because people need to understand, it's not the Trump-Clinton versus the Trump-Biden margins. People look at those. Try looking at you have the Trump vote, and then you have the Never Trump vote. The Never Trump vote was split in 2020, or 2016. They were not split in 2020. So when you look at a map like this, you look at Arizona, He actually went up 1% in the state. Third parties just went down. A lot of them went to Biden. If he gets 49.5 this time around, or maybe even 49, depending on that third-party vote share, he's going to take the state of Arizona. And that's what people need to understand. You have a very high floor, you have a very low ceiling, but if he gets 50, it's plausible. If he gains the same rate he did, and Republicans are gaining like crazy in registrations in Arizona, a lot of that's coming from even South Phoenix. You're seeing improvements among Hispanic voters. A lot of the old rhino types, they, for lack of a better term, they pass away. They die out. It's part of life. And then you have new voters that come, and younger voters are now starting to register more Republican. It's like, what's going on? In Nevada, Nevada is a possibly very beautiful situation going on up there. We're going to get a confirmation on that some point during election night. Probably not going to even know the results for a few days in full, but I think Trump's going to win in Nevada by possibly a surprising, I could see him win by 2 or 3. Matthew Foxtrot says, any thoughts what Lindsey Graham, because he's kind of right where people will watch Trump but think he's risky to vote for? Well, Lindsey Graham is somebody who, he's always been a rhino. He will cozy up to Trump. He's like Trump's rhino guy, the rhino whisperer, but even then he's more subversive than anything else. So I don't know. People think he's People do think Trump is risky to vote for, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to get 70 plus million votes, period. It's just all perception. People will find excuses not to support Trump for one reason or another. He can go out there, run everything perfectly. You're going to have a large segment of that population out there, like the aforementioned Arizona Republican rhinos or any other group. It's just not going to vote for him, regardless of what he does. He just broke these people back in 2016, and they've never recovered from it. They've never recovered. Jagger Rodel says, will you stream any of the DNC? Probably not, but I will stream after on at least 2 of the nights. Quantum Football says, I saw thousands of Trump signs as I drove around Michigan this weekend, but only 2 for Mike Rogers. Well, I've been hearing Rogers has a lot more support in like the suburbs. And there's even some people they talk to who won't vote for Trump but are voting for Rogers. So it depends on the location. I think that Rogers has a good shot to win. He may even outrun Trump. He's outrunning him in some of the polls that we've seen, which was not happening so far. Matthew Foxtrot says typos. Yeah, I got the gist of what you were saying. Lisa Thigalicious says, any house race polls? I haven't seen any recently. Real Text and Politics for 25-month member chat says, how are you feeling about the recent North Carolina down ballot polls for governor and stuff? Well, I've seen a couple, and they're not exactly looking good, but there are so many undecideds, it's kind of hard to pinpoint it. And we saw this movie play out. Roy Cooper was winning by nearly 20 points at this point against Dan Forrest. And the final polls had him winning by like 11. He only won by like 4. Now, do I think Mark Robinson's, if I had to bet on Robinson or Stein, I might lean Stein at this point. I do think it's going to be very close. I would encourage people to, North Carolina, get out and vote. Don't take the state for granted and do a lot to make sure that we can get Mark Robinson across the finish line as well. If you know people that are ticket splitting, try to talk him out of it. They're running all these ads, I'm sure. They're saying he's an extremist, whatever. It's not exactly true. It's not. A lot of people know it's not true. They take things out of context. They chastise him for things that he's already moved past. It's like, leave it in the past. Let it go. The guy's awesome. If it wasn't for any controversies with that, baritone voice of his, he would win probably by like 20 points. But it is what it is. There are actually some, or I guess you'd say there was a Harris Robinson voter that Robinson converted a week or so ago that he talked about, which is pretty funny. Brandon Fairbanks says, in 2020, Rasmussen had Trump losing the popular vote by 4.5, close in battleground states. Now they have him up 4 and barely ahead. Are they suggesting a leftward trend? Well, I think they're overestimating Donald Trump. If you actually look at their final poll in 2020, it's different, I believe. It was not +4. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was Biden +1. So they usually overestimate Donald Trump by what some of like the, average to right or to left leaning pollster, like the Biden plus 7s were overestimating him, or the Biden plus 8s were. So I would take it, put it in the aggregate. It's a good aggregate corrector. Nationally, they're not all that accurate historically, but they're not as bad as some people say. They just happen to overestimate instead of underestimate by a lot. And in terms of the statewide polls, they're usually dead on. And in some cases, the errors mostly in 2020, they overestimated Democrats. So do take that with a grain of salt as well. Let's see. Sean Cole says Rhino Whisperer. Yeah, Rhino Whisperer. That's true. Ragdoll MMA says, I'm nervous about Arizona, but we will win Nevada for sure. Well, I'm nervous about every state. I'm not saying it's a done deal. I don't think Nevada's a sure thing, and I don't think Arizona's like a unique reason for concern. I will say that Arizona actually did pass an election integrity bill. People forget about it, but the governor was forced to, essentially, because the Republican state legislature, they just kept pushing it forward, and she eventually caved to the demands. So already you see a lot of potential in Arizona. I mean, it is true there's the abortion thing on the ballot, but is that going to really drum up a ridiculous amount of enthusiasm that Harris herself is not able to drum up against like that crowd? And even though people say Trump's Achilles heel in Arizona are like the rhinos or whatever, the independent McCain people, those people they're not exactly uniquely fired up about abortion either. Arizona is not really that, pro-abortion of a state. It definitely is more so than like Georgia, but I think Nevada is arguably more pro-abortion. In fact, Georgia, that's another reason why I feel like Democrats are going to potentially struggle, is because they won't be able to weaponize that issue nearly as much as they would like to. Because a lot of the voter base that they have in Georgia, they're minority voters. And while Harris is trying to drum up enthusiasm there, they're not going to exactly resonate with this message about abortion, democracy. They've never done it. It's partially why Trump is doing so well with Hispanic voters, but they're also a big share in Arizona of the Democrats, and they're losing them. A lot of them in registration data, they're losing them. In even 2022 in Arizona, they bled support. Nevada as well. And in a presidential year where you have more of those lower propensity Hispanic types that delivered like South Texas for Trump in 2020, coming out to vote, you could maybe see Clark County get closer, Clark County flip outright in Nevada. It's possible. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but it's possible. So Josh Light says, should Trump do a press conference addressing January 6th? Seen some people say they aren't voting for him. But no, that's, like I said, I don't think it's smart to talk about it because it's happened so many years ago. I think a lot of people, based off of the recent events over the past month or two, have probably memory holded a bit. And Democrats don't really want to bring that up, because then they'll have to deal with, oh, well, Trump's like, oh, you talk about that. Well, let's talk about what happened at my rally where more people ended up getting hurt or more people ended up dying that were, because technically the only person who died or was killed at the January 6th happened to be one of the protesters who was shot by a police officer and was unarmed, by the way, which if, his roles were reversed, you would probably see riots over the situation. From the left, you would easily see it. When we saw it how many times in 2020 over misinformation, disinformation. But I don't think he needs to address it. A lot of people that aren't voting for him because of 1/6, they were not going to be voting for him anyways. That's the thing that a lot of people don't seem to grasp. They don't seem to really understand. So up next we have Wyatt says, how do you keep a good attitude while we lose ground on every issue? Depends how you mean by losing ground on every issue. I feel like we're gaining ground on a lot of issues. We're gaining ground on it seems like in a lot of polls we see on immigration, we're moving the Overton window on the topic. I mean, mass deportations are a majority popular position. I mean, losing ground on the issues, it's a little bit questionable what issues we're continuously losing ground on. Feels like, if anything, we're turning a corner on some. And some of the most important issues as well. Let's see here. Raging Rock for 10 says there's a lot of people saying Trump will get 1 year in prison. Do you think that's likely to happen? Does it worry you? Seems like they will be desperate to try it. Well, I've heard a lot of people also say that he's likely to avoid anything until post-election because of the appeal process. Now, is that a guarantee? I don't know, but let's look at the poly market odds for Trump in jail by Election Day. Now, keep in mind the poly market odds also showed Trump to be convicted with an 80% rate. The Trump in jail before Election Day is at 5%. 5% odds. So if Democrats really want to go there and give Trump an unpopular jail sentence and put him in jail, put the spotlight back on him, make him a martyr, I mean, that's their move. I don't know if they're dumb enough to do it. I really don't know if they're dumb enough to do it. You say they're desperate to do it. It's possible. If they do it, it doesn't necessarily... It worries me about his safety more so than it worries me about the election. Because people are voting regardless. If you're going to vote for Trump over Harris and then the regime puts Trump behind bars, are you really going to vote for Harris? Really? It doesn't really seem to be the case. It doesn't seem to be something that would be anything other than the Democrats trying to imprison the political opponent that they have because they can't beat him for the sake of democracy because he allegedly, 10 years ago wrote something down wrong in a book, which, again, there's even questionability if that was even beyond a reasonable doubt against the set laws that they claim that he violated. But Walk Talk 21 says, you want to talk about delusional supporters, look no further than Woodrow Wilson supporters. My New Jersey governor who cares about America or Harding fans will return to normalcy. Good thing I was not alive back then. Well, I feel like you're kind of seeing the same thing with Biden. You're kind of seeing with Biden in 2020. Oh, return to normalcy. And then they were proven wrong. Everything blew up in their face because Trump was vindicated about literally everything. Mike M. for tens, they fixed the polls in Arizona to match cheating. They left is doing it nationally too. We're screwed if people don't wake up. Love your vids. You're wicked smart, but consider election meddling more. Well, I mean, this is why we're conducting polls as well, because think about it. I get the concern. Maricopa County's been iffy. Now, there are new procedures in place. There are safeguards in place. The RNC has done certain things, and we'll see this because Georgia's defortified completely, almost completely. So if Georgia moves right, but Arizona still stays a tight, narrow win, and there's questionabilities, there's questions, but the polling, I don't know how the polling really plays into this because a lot of the states that were so-called, fortified, you look at Wisconsin, the polls underestimated Trump by 7 points anyways to the final end result. So this is why we're doing polls in part. We're not cooking our polls. We're looking at the polls based off of the data that we collect, and we're going to analyze them and see exactly where the race is at, and we're going to be very, very transparent about that process. If Trump is down in a state that we expect him to be up in, we're still going to release that poll, and I'm going to explain why the poll shows what it does, or maybe it's possible Trump actually is not doing as well as we think in certain places, and that needs to be analyzed too. But the response bias we're getting just from the raw sample is crazy. It's something like we've never seen before. You're talking about a sample you get that's like close to D plus 20. Now, the second, half of the sample, the other 500 was more baseline. It was D plus 3, which is fairer. And, even if you weigh that sample, it's roughly 50-50 in the popular vote. But there's so many other ways to weight it that we don't even know how it's going to shake out. So I can't exactly say that we have any conclusive data on the poll other than the fact that the polls, both instances, drastically underestimated the Donald Trump callback support, which means that if only low 30s of the voter base voted for Trump in 2020, that's not all that great. Why it says social issues specifically? Well, depends on the social issue. I feel like culture has become very liberalized. I don't know to what extent it could even get worse in some instances. I mean, we just got to keep pushing back against it. I feel like a lot of that's better done at the state level. I think there's a lot of reforms at the national level that can be done, but they're not exactly going to directly address the specific issues. You have to fire a lot of people. You have to get rid of the bureaucrats. You have to replace them with loyalists to the ideas of conservatism, put them back in power, and just gut the institutions that have been destroying this country for so long, so doubt in them, attack them. That's why Trump, despite arguably being very socially liberal for a Republican on a lot of things, was arguably one of the best people, one of the best political figures that we've ever seen to open up a lot of people's eyes to this decay as a nation, because he sowed a lot of doubt on those institutions because they hated him, because he was somebody that could effectively, go out there and do that, even though technically he was not a radical on a lot of social issues, kind of a moderate on a lot of social issues, but he's a nationalist and they don't like that. He's a populist. They don't like that. So Spirits, his thoughts on Nick Fuentes. I've given my thoughts before, but like I've said, I feel like as for the recent developments, feels like he's just trying to go against Trump for one reason or another, in part because I don't know what it is. He doesn't like Trump's stances on certain things, but some people are asking other questions about what the motivations are that I've seen behind his turn on that. I mean, you look at the fact that I said it when he got replatformed. I said, I believe in free speech. I don't agree with a lot of what he has to say. That's true. But free speech is free speech. If you censor people, you're going to be taking away, it's kind of a domino effect per se. You take the most controversial takes that are legal takes that you could have legally out of the public discourse. It's going to be what's next on the chopping block. What's next on the chopping block? It never ends. But there is a question. It's like he's kept off the platforms for 2 years, and then he gets back on. It's like, well, it's interesting. The second he gets back on the platform, he turns on Trump. He attacks Donald Trump. And I'm not saying Elon's behind this. I don't even know to what extent there is like a conspiracy, but I've seen a lot of people, post that theory that ever since he's kind of returned to the public eye, that there's some deal that's cut for I don't know. I don't know what's going on, for the record. But yeah, there's a strange element to the fringe right, which is what it is. And they want to take down Donald Trump for some reason. I don't know if it's for accelerationist purposes. I don't know exactly what the reasons are, but they're not consistent, because every single critique that I hear from these people was present in the 2016 campaign. Oh, Donald Trump mentioned Israel or something. Well, he mentioned it in the 2016 RNC speech. You'll never hear these people pick apart the 2016 RNC speech. What did he say about something about how we need to end radical Islam to protect he said the LGBTQ community. Those were Trump's words, by the way. Very liberal on certain things. I didn't hear any complaints about a lot of different things then. Nobody's going to go back and pick it apart. But there's like a little bit of revision. Oh, well, Trump was really far right, and then now he's not, because we'll pick apart other things that he said, which he also happened to say this cycle that were, base, so to speak. It's it's just weird to me. It's not exactly something that I care too much about. So it is what it is. Jay Jazz says, can Juan Merchant and Ingeron pay any real consequences if Trump wins? It's possible. I mean, if they could go after Trump for innocuous things, there's no reason why we can't go after them. The question is, will Trump actually do it? Because Donald Trump is somebody that, he does want, if he wins, he'll be like, oh, we got to unite the country. And that's admirable, and I get it. But the problem is they don't view it the same way that he views it. This is not not 1990s anymore. You're not running a business anymore. There's got to be something a little bit deeper than that at play. And hopefully Trump is going to do something like that. But even back then, he didn't want to go after Hillary. And he talks about why he didn't want to go after Hillary. And I understand why you don't want to go after Hillary. It is not a good look to put the wife of a former president in jail. But the problem is that they don't care about putting the actual president in jail. Think about it. They don't care about that. Why should you have to exactly, bend over backwards for them if they would never, even in a million years, save you from anything? And I think we've seen that over the past couple of months. Propa for 10 says, I feel like they'll give him house arrest to keep him from campaigning. They'll say, see, we didn't jail him. If he can't campaign, that's horrible for winning chances. Let's be real, corrupt Democrats. Well, we'll have to see. I agree it would backfire on them, maybe a little bit less than actual jail. But that would be bad if they did that and they confined him. That doesn't necessarily mean that his chances would be significantly affected, depending on how people would perceive it. We got to vote regardless. He's got surrogates on the campaign trail, but house arrest wouldn't be ideal. Community service would be ideal. The optics of him picking up trash on the side of the road would be ideal. He'll do it in swing states if possible. I don't know if it's possible, but we'll see. Riley Moore for 10 says Dave McCormick and Bob Casey are 3 points away from each other in Pennsylvania. I saw that, actually. And that probably is going to... I actually believe the Rasmussen poll is probably in line with what the result's going to be. Trump wins by 1, Casey wins by 3. I could see that happen. Casey's just hard to beat. He's very overrated by the people of Pennsylvania, but that's kind of the problem. But again, you're not going to see a ridiculous ticket split. There's no way. I think McCormick would have a shot if Biden was the nominee. I think McCormick might actually have won, but we'll see. John Waffle says, what scares me is Kamala's record as Attorney General and DA, especially in San Francisco. Apparently she was tough on crime. That can sway in swing states like Arizona. Well, was she really that tough on crime? She's letting murderers out of jail. Not even the riot fund, the bail fund that we're hearing a lot about. But I don't know. You know, it's strange. But I think it's more that she's a hypocrite. She put people in crime for she put people in jail for very innocuous crimes. We're having a lot of trouble getting the words out tonight. I know it's late, but it's true. A lot of trouble for her in that department because she can't pick a lane. She's bought and paid for her entire career. I think that's a losing argument. She's going to be like, I'm a prosecutor president. I'll be a prosecutor president. She did the same thing back in 2019, 2020. People didn't buy it. They didn't buy it at all. The Pueb says, is it true that Nick is a white? Well, he's not even white, so that's technically not true. But I don't even. It depends on the definition. Depends on what takes you want to quantify as such. I mean, either way, he's on the fringe right. I'll say that in terms of his opinions about like all this stuff about Jews that he said and stuff like that. And then it's like, oh, it's irony. But then if you attack somebody, the same people come after you and they'll be like, oh, well, you're actually secretly Jewish. And I'm like, I thought that didn't matter. It's like, it's just a spiraling of, I don't know. It's just stupid. The whole thing is dumb. But if you apparently support Trump, now you're controlled opposition. I've heard that. If you support Trump, some of these people, they'll say you're controlled opposition if you support Trump. If you happen to have one of the Trump red laser eyes PFPs or whatever on Twitter, people call you controlled opposition. If you care about the economy as well, I've heard that you're controlled opposition for caring about an issue that affects a lot of other issues in this country. You're apparently controlled opposition. It's strange to me. It's strange. But what can I say? I don't care. It's an irrelevant, largely irrelevant faction. I'll say that. A largely irrelevant faction. They're very loud. They're very loud. People are too afraid to respond in many instances because they pile on. They're very loud. I get it, whatever. But it's not worth discussing. I would rather talk about the economy than internet drama. I'd rather talk about other issues. Some people probably find that boring. Well, they can, I don't know, watch some other show. Jay Lingo says, why isn't Trump Vance hammering the Democrats on the Biden dementia cover-up? Harris was an accomplice. It seems like a winning issue. Well, I think there's a lot of other issues to touch base on that are more important. Is it an issue most people agree with? I mean, I guess. But I think tying Harris to Biden is kind of the important priority right now. So let's see. I'm Home says Trump has good chances even with... Yeah, exactly. Propa says, imagine if Trump has to do community service by picking up trash in Democrat-run cities, free campaigning. Yeah, exactly. So long as there's proper security, I think it'd be a big, big win for Trump. Jay Jazz says, where are Stefanik, Cruz, etc.? The country's literally in danger. There's no maximum effort for our party. Well, Ted Cruz is trying to win the Senate race. If you're wondering why Elise Stefanik isn't on the campaign trail, she's not really a high-up Trump surrogate anyways. You see Vance going everywhere. You're seeing Trump go everywhere this week. I'd like to see more people on the campaign trail, but we're probably not going to see that until we get down the full stretch. Keep in mind, we're still in August. The DNC is literally this week. After the DNC, it's time to go all in. It's time to make sure that we can do everything in our power to make sure we deliver this election for Donald Trump. And I think we will. I mean, you look at these maps. These maps are important. It's the Trump vote versus the anti-Trump vote. And you see Trump gaining in Arizona. If he gains the same amount in these states, he cracks 50 in both. He cracks 50 in Wisconsin. He gets 49.9 in PA, which, I mean, third parties are going to be more than 0.2%. So, yeah, I think that Donald Trump has put himself in a very good position. Georgia and North Carolina are different, but turnout dynamics in 2020 were very unique. We didn't see the same exact thing happen in the midterms, but even so, he still hits 50 in North Carolina regardless this cycle if the trend continues. As for Georgia, he would go down, but Georgia's changed a lot regarding their election system. I believe Trump's going to be able to go out there and win. There are questions about what's black turnout going to be and what is it going to look like. Is Trump going to actually gain 4%? Because if he holds his own with whites, gains 4%, get the right amount of turnout in the state among the usual base, you're going to have enough support to win Georgia. So these are a lot of questions that do need to be answered for sure. But in terms of the surrogates on the campaign trail, I'm not too worried about that. I'm not too worried at all. But again, make sure you guys like and subscribe. We want to hit 195K at some point. Also, make sure you guys, if you guys want to see more polls that we're going to conduct, you can feel free to donate. The link is in the top of the description. We have a GoFundMe. I didn't set it up, but the polling campaign team set it up. Donation protected. You don't get what you get your money back. That's also true. But if you guys want to support, you guys want to see more polls, feel free. The link is in the top of the description down below. Other than that, we can look in regular chat. This will be the final call for super chats. We'll end the show in about 5 minutes. Cameron Fallgout says, if DNC riots break out, does Harris lose support? Well, I think that I think that Harris definitely is not going to make her look good. I don't know how much support she'll lose. You know, people always say social unrest. It doesn't make Biden look good if it's under his watch. If it doesn't make Biden look good, it doesn't make Harris look good. It might hurt him with independence, but by how much? Like I've said, I feel like most people have made up their mind in this country. That's why I don't buy these ridiculous polling swings. Trump is at 48. Harris is probably somewhere around there as well. The rest are undecided. Some might go third party. Who knows? But it's going to be a very close election. The question is, how many new voters is Harris actually bringing into the fold that Biden wasn't, if at all? I mean, obviously she's going to bring in some people who are undecided, but is Harris really bringing in new supporters that never voted in 2020 when Democrats had a very favorable year for very, very high turnout? I mean, this is a question. I'd like to hear what people have to say about it. But you could argue Trump is bringing in some new people too. Trump was winning 2020 non-voters for the longest time. So, I don't know. We'll look in our regular chat as well. We'll end the show in about a few minutes. Kamala got vibes. What do those vibes do? What vibes? I feel like the energy is not where it even was 2 weeks ago from what I see. I don't know. But anecdotes I've heard, anecdotes I've seen don't add up with the polling, which is not really ideal. It's not really ideal at all. Too many females. Well, females already were not voting for Trump. So what's the question? And there's a lot of people voting on vibes that are voting for Donald Trump because they see the economy. Now, the economy, the data's good, they say. It's not even that good. But the data, they say, is good. But most people, when polled, believe the economy is in shambles. Unemployment is at a 50-year high, even when it was below 4%. And they believe the inflation rate is much higher than it is. And they believe we're in a recession. So how exactly is the vibe benefiting Kamala Harris? I don't quite see it. I don't quite see it. The vibe of the country right now is that it's in shambles from a lot of people. That's not gonna bode too well. The best thing she has going for her is she's not Biden. But keep in mind, there's a lot of dirt on her that Biden didn't have. Mike M says there are legit polling shifts, just not shady polling practices. Many factors at play. Thank you for your attention to detail and involvement. Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Andrew Byer Says, does Biden turn his back on the party during his speech tomorrow? No, he has no agency over his own. He's pissed, but he's not going to show it. It'd be the Wojak, the crying, seething Wojak with the mask on. That's what Biden's going to be. At best, you'll get a Freudian slip or something. Should be pretty funny. But he's on teleprompter. Biden on teleprompter is not nearly as awful as Biden off teleprompter because he just has to read words. He'll slur half of them, but he's reading the words. He'll stammer. The web says Kamala's got crabs. Well, yeah. Those are the vibes, I guess. I don't know. If those are the vibes, then that's not a good look for her. I can't endorse that. I don't know. I would hope not. I would really hope not. But we'll see. The vibe, and the thing is, like, the vibe of Kamala Harris is also, it's somebody who's like an airhead from California. Like Biden, the vibe of Biden was, he's like the politician guy, generic Democrat, partially because he stayed in his basement, Scranton Joe. Obviously, then the vibe became the guy's like on his deathbed. Kamala Harris, the vibe is, if you want to even paint it in a positive picture, she's like a ditzy wine ant or something. But is that somebody people want to make president? Is that somebody people are going to want to make president? That's the real question. And the other thing is women don't like other women as much as people make it out to be. This is another thing because Kamala Harris, how many times have we seen women fight with other women, not even just in politics, but in the real world? There's reality shows based on that fact that women love to watch. There's a whole entire network, probably 4 or 5 entire networks dedicated to that stuff. So this notion, women like other women, really? Is that always true? Now, women are going to vote their political interests. Kamala Harris is going to do just fine with women. She'll win the woman vote. She'll win the unmarried women vote by a ridiculous amount, but it's mainly going to be due to policy more so than, it's because women resonate with her being a woman. They're not even doing the whole first woman president thing nearly as much as they tried it with Hillary Clinton as well. Now, maybe they think that it backfired, so they don't want to go down that road again, but we have yet to see. Wyatt says, what's the mindset of an independent? Independents just seem to be either not real or dumb to me. People that are less politically involved, people that like certain aspects of certain parties but hate certain aspects of certain parties as well. I think that about 10% of the electorate are true independents. I think roughly you have probably around 45% of the electorate that's either Republican or Republican leaning, and 45% of the electorate that's either Democrat or Democrat leaning. You got around 10% of the electorate that comprises of true independents. And usually, a lot of them probably even have their leans and biases in terms of their voting histories, etc. I don't know. I really don't know. But it just depends on the person. I used to consider myself, I would still probably say I'm, if they say, are you Democrat, Republican, or right-leaning independent, a left-leaning independent, I've always said right-leaning independent because I don't really like the GOP establishment all that much, but I'd never vote for a Democrat, so technically I'm more just of a Republican leaner. If I was in a state that registered by party, I would register as a Republican if there were closed primaries, or if I ran for office, I'd identify as a Republican, I'd run as a Republican. But CJYT96 says, can you give my Biden short some exposure? Well, you got exposure with that super chat. Fiji Boy says, you think Kamala wins, we have a chance in the future? No. You're not winning. You're not beating her in 28. They're not letting their first female president lose re-election. There's no way they'll let her lose re-election. If they can get her elected in this environment, she'll get elected in that environment. It doesn't matter if the country's far worse off. She'll get elected. Especially because, there's questions about how strong the Republican bench really is at that point. You're not going to have 82-year-old Trump run again. He already said he wouldn't do it. Why would you want somebody to do it? He's not going to win a primary. He's not going to want to tarnish his legacy like that. Leon says, you don't hear about the Kamala brat anymore. Well, because it's a stupid meme that failed to catch on in reality. That's the thing. A lot of the online stuff that fails to catch on will not spill over into the real world as easily. The coconut stuff, it's just stupid. How the hell does that reach the average voter in Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania that is on the fence about who to vote for this November? Think about it. It just really doesn't. I don't know. We'll end the stream. We got 1,600 people in chat. Like the stream. We're going to wrap things up as it stands right now. But anyways, guys, make sure you like the stream, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. Make sure you guys comment down below if you're watching on replay. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below. I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.